Why do some older men instantly give off a creepy vibe the moment they enter a room, while others radiate wisdom, confidence, and quiet respect? It's a painful question many avoid, but the consequences grow larger with age. Maybe you've seen it. The man who tries too hard to impress younger people, clings awkwardly to relevance, or stares too long. People instinctively pull away. And here's the shocking truth. Creeps aren't born. They're created through invisible habits that slowly twist a man's energy until the world around him recoils. Marcus Aurelius warned in Meditations that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Modern psychology agrees. The mind shapes behavior, and behavior shapes presence. But ask yourself, what subtle habits are quietly shifting your presence right now, without your awareness? Most men never see these changes until it's too late, until reputation becomes a whisper others avoid. And the tragic part is, these habits begin innocently, rooted in loneliness, insecurity, and fear of fading. You may feel this, or you may deny it, but the world sees what you're broadcasting louder than your words. Before we reveal the 3 habits that separate dignified maturity from unsettling energy, we must understand a deeper crisis, the fear of irrelevance. Have you felt it? The creeping worry that younger generations move faster, dress differently, speak in codes you don't understand, while the world worships youth like a golden idol. Neuroscience calls this temporal self-displacement, the fear that your time has passed. When a man feels this, he clings to attention, validation, admiration, and when attention becomes hunger, hunger becomes creepiness. Seneca wrote, "He who seeks approval puts himself at the mercy of others." If you depend on youth's approval, your presence becomes desperate rather than grounded. But here's where the story turns. Some older men eclipse age entirely. They walk with an aura so composed that others lean in, curious. They've mastered ancient habits the Stoics guarded like treasure. You've probably seen such a man before. The quiet respect, the effortless calm. People don't avoid him, they gravitate to him. What secret lines separate these 2 archetypes? Let's ask a question that might sting. How often do you feel the need to prove you're still relevant? Do you talk too much about the past because the present feels uncertain? Do you scan for attention in social spaces, hoping someone recognizes your remaining spark? When a man becomes unaware of these impulses, subtle behaviors seep out: uncomfortable eye contact, forced jokes, lingering comments. Modern psychology calls this compensatory behavior. Epictetus warned, "Dignity consists not in possessing honors, but in deserving them." When you chase attention to prove worth, your dignity erodes, and people feel something off. But the good news? These habits are reversible. In fact, the Stoics built mental frameworks to ensure presence grows stronger with age, not weaker. And today's neuroscience confirms that emotional regulation, self-mastery, and boundary awareness produce calm, charismatic energy well into late life. But here's the twist. You might already be practicing one of the hidden habits that triggers discomfort in others without realizing it. And you'll continue until someone tells you the truth. We will uncover all 3, but not yet. First, you must understand the psychological force behind why people label someone creepy. Studies show creepiness is less about danger and more about unpredictability. When someone behaves strangely, the brain can't predict their next move, and humans fear what they can't predict. Zeno of Citium taught, "Man conquers the world by conquering himself." Loss of self-control means loss of predictable energy, and unpredictability is the blueprint of creepiness. Watch how open loops unfold. What internal behaviors make you unpredictable? What emotional habits distort your presence? How does insecurity leak through posture, tone, silence? If you think this doesn't apply to you, pause. Social perception changes rapidly with age. A compliment from a young man can feel sweet. The same words from an older man can trigger discomfort. Why? Context. Cleanthes wrote that virtue is harmony with nature. When behavior clashes with context, the result is disharmony, felt instantly. The key is not avoiding younger generations, but embodying self-mastery, boundaries, and value. But this journey demands honesty, and in this video we will peel back layers very few are brave enough to look at. Keep watching, because after we expose the silent forces that twist energy into creepiness, we will reveal 3 Stoic habits that transform presence into confidence, warmth, and respect. But not yet. The final habit, revealed only near the end, will surprise you, and once you see it, you'll never unsee it.
Picture this: an older man sitting alone at the edge of a social gathering. He's not dangerous, not malicious, but something about the way he scans the room makes everyone uneasy. People whisper without knowing why. He laughs a little too hard at jokes, stands a little too close, and his eyes linger just a moment longer than comfort allows. He doesn't mean harm, but the energy he projects screams, "See me, notice me, validate me." And deep down, he feels invisible. This is how creepiness begins, not with evil intent, but with unmet emotional hunger. Modern psychology calls it social compensation syndrome, when attention becomes the currency for worth. Stoics warned exactly against this inner thirst. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Ambition means tying your well-being to what others say or do." That man, hungry for external validation, becomes unpredictable and unsettling because his behavior is anchored to reaction rather than reason. But imagine another man at the same gathering, quiet, relaxed, watching with calm eyes. He needs nothing, expects nothing, and strangely, people gravitate toward him. They feel safe. This contrast begins with mindset, not age. But where does this shift begin? Often earlier than we realize. As a man ages, roles transform. Career changes, children grow, attention naturally shifts to younger generations. A once important man becomes background noise. This ego displacement triggers behaviors that younger people interpret as creepy. For instance, compliments about appearance or youthful behavior feel invasive rather than kind. Why? Because context and intent matter. Seneca wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." Yet many older men chase youth to feel young, not wisdom to feel whole. The tragedy lies here. In the pursuit of being seen, they become misunderstood. The Stoics would say, you lose dignity the moment you negotiate your worth with external eyes. Imagine how different the world would feel if more men understood that respect is not demanded, it's radiated through quiet self-control. Let's go deeper into the psychology. Researchers say creepiness spikes when someone violates social boundaries. This isn't always physical, it's often emotional. Oversharing personal details, inappropriate jokes, forced intimacy, all attempt to create closeness quickly, which the human brain interprets as unpredictable and therefore threatening. Epictetus taught, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Freedom here means emotional self-governance, but when loneliness grows, boundaries crumble, and the older man begins to project desperation without realizing it. Watch this closely. Desperation is visible in eyes, posture, voice tone, and timing. Younger minds are wired, evolutionarily, to detect it instantly. They pull away, not because age is unattractive, but because unpredictability is. And the tragedy is that many older men misinterpret this rejection as ageism instead of energy mismatch. They respond by trying harder, intensifying the very habits that push others further away. Imagine now a third man, someone who has embraced aging instead of fighting it. He listens more than he speaks. Compliments are about character, not appearance. His humor is self-aware, not provocative. When he speaks, silence follows, not awkwardly, but respectfully. He embodies what Zeno called apatheia, not indifference, but freedom from passion's chaos. Modern neuroscience would describe his brain as regulated. Dopamine equilibrium, cortisol low, emotional circuits balanced. He doesn't chase excitement. He cultivates presence. And presence commands respect across generations. People label such men as wise, cool, or grounded. Nothing about him is creepy because his energy is predictable, warm, and controlled. Younger men admire him. Women feel safe around him. Older men envy him. He has solved a problem most never even identify. But how? Here's a painful truth. The moment a man begins to fear aging, he behaves unnaturally. Instead of becoming deeper, he becomes louder. Instead of growing wiser, he tries to appear younger. Cleanthes taught, happiness is a good flow of life. But when you swim against time, your flow becomes turbulent. Desperation becomes visible in micro-expressions. Eyes search instead of observe. Jokes are edged with insecurity. And remember, the brain detects micro-expressions in under 200 milliseconds. People feel energy before words even form. This is why some older men, even without saying something inappropriate, still trigger discomfort. Their energy whispers, "Please validate me." And nothing is more unsettling than the silent plea of a starving ego. But let's pause, because before revealing the 3 habits that transform a man's presence from creepy to compelling, we must understand one more layer, the silent narrative inside the older man's mind. He tells himself stories. I used to be admired. They used to listen to me. I used to matter. These thoughts create pressure. Pressure becomes tension. Tension becomes behavioral leakage. This is precisely what modern therapists observe: unresolved identity grief. The Stoics warned against attachment to external identity. Marcus wrote, "Don't hanker after what you don't have." When a man's worth is attached to his past, he fears the present. Fear breeds control. Control breeds creepiness. But liberation exists, and the next paragraphs will slowly unravel the ancient practices that shape presence into strength. Stay with this, because as we peel back deeper psychological layers, you'll recognize subtle habits you never knew were dangerous. And when the first habit is finally revealed, not yet, you'll understand how everything changes with one internal shift that radiates outward like light.
Have you ever wondered why some older men seem oblivious to the discomfort they create? It's not always intentional. Most never receive honest feedback because society avoids awkward truth. People would rather whisper behind backs than confront someone's subtle boundary violations. And without feedback, behavior decays silently. It begins with small things, hovering too long in conversations, inserting themselves into younger social circles, or offering unsolicited advice as if wisdom must be forced. Modern neuroscience calls this social self-blindness, the gradual dulling of one's ability to read emotional cues. When brain circuits responsible for empathy weaken through isolation, a man can no longer feel when someone pulls back. Stoics warned that ignorance begins with losing awareness of oneself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Observe what your mind is doing." But how many men actually observe their own social footprint? How many notice when someone subtly steps away? Awareness is the first line of defense against creepiness, yet it's the first capacity to decline when ego swells. Let's explore something rarely discussed, the loneliness paradox. As men age, their social circles shrink dramatically. Friends move, careers end, family becomes busy. Social touchpoints fade. Loneliness increases dopamine sensitivity. The brain becomes hungrier for attention. So when interaction finally appears, men may cling, overcompensate, or push emotional intensity too quickly. This is why compliments feel heavier, why pauses feel awkward, why laughter feels forced. It's emotional hunger disguised as enthusiasm. Seneca warned, "He who needs nothing can never be defeated." But needing attention is one of the most visible vulnerabilities. Younger people sense it instantly, often unconsciously, and distance themselves. Not because they hate older men, but because energy that seeks something often feels like it wants too much. And nothing unsettles the human spirit like the possibility of forced intimacy. Now imagine the opposite, a man who has cultivated solitude as strength rather than punishment. He doesn't chase attention because he already gives it to himself. Psychologists call this self-sufficiency bias. When your internal reward system is strong enough, you no longer depend on external validation. This is exactly what Stoicism trained, an inner citadel, impenetrable to loneliness. Epictetus famously taught, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." Transfer that principle socially. Want less from others, and your presence becomes lighter, calmer, safer. And when presence feels safe, people approach willingly. This is the missing link most men overlook. Presence is not what you do, it's what you radiate. Let's open another layer. Many older men carry invisible emotional wounds, failed careers, lost relationships, missed opportunities. These wounds create bitterness that leaks out in sarcasm, passive-aggressive jokes, or critical comments. Bitterness is felt just as strongly as desperation. Modern behavioral science shows bitterness activates the same avoidance circuits in the brain as fear. People sense it and step back. Cleanthes believed virtue was consistency between inner values and outer behavior. When wounds control reaction, behavior becomes inconsistent, unpredictable. And unpredictability, remember, is the core ingredient of creepiness. The world doesn't recoil from age, it recoils from unpredictable emotional energy. This is why some older men radiate warmth while others radiate discomfort. The difference is emotional order. But here's a twist almost nobody sees coming. Trying to look youthful actually accelerates perception of creepiness. Younger clothing, slang, flirting, or forced trends create a context violation, a psychological dissonance that triggers discomfort. Marcus Aurelius advised, "Be content to be what you are." When behavior doesn't match age, the brain perceives manipulation. Authenticity dissolves. But when a man embodies his age with confidence, he is seen as a mentor, not a threat. The irony is stunning. Acceptance creates respect, while resistance creates ridicule. Let's go deeper into social perception. Humans are wired to detect hierarchy and intention. When an older man positions himself as competitor to youth, tension forms. But when he positions himself as a mentor, tension dissolves. Modern psychology calls this status friction. Stoically, it's ego misalignment. Zeno taught that harmony with nature includes harmony with time. Fighting time is a fool's battle. Partnering with it is wisdom. Older men who try to compete with youth lose dignity. Those who offer guidance gain admiration. And here's something most will never admit: admiration is more powerful than attraction. Attraction fades, admiration deepens, and admiration never feels creepy. But before revealing the first habit, still later, we must examine posture and silence. Watch how some older men fidget, hover, or talk incessantly to fill silence. Silence terrifies them because silence reflects inward. But silence mastered becomes magnetism. Neuroscience shows that controlled silence signals confidence. Stoicism trained silence as discipline. A man who is comfortable in calm becomes predictable. Predictable energy is safe energy. Safe energy is never creepy.
Identity is a fragile thing, especially for men whose worth was once tied to accomplishment, status, or power. When retirement hits, when children grow independent, when compliments stop arriving, the ego panics. It whispers, "Who am I now?" And if a man never built identity beyond his achievements, this crisis becomes unbearable. Modern psychology calls this identity foreclosure, when a person's sense of self collapses once their external roles vanish. This collapse often manifests in subtle, socially uneasy behaviors, boasting about outdated successes, interrupting conversations to prove knowledge, or criticizing youth as a defense against feeling obsolete. People feel the hidden message, "Pay attention to me so I can feel like myself again." But Stoicism offers a brutal yet liberating truth. Your identity must live within you, not on you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." If a man only thinks of his glory days, his present becomes haunted. Haunting energies feel creepy, not because they're evil, but because they're not present. Watch what happens when presence fades. A man who lives mentally in the past stops reading the room, misses social cues, and clings to outdated humor or norms. Neuroscience shows that when nostalgia becomes chronic, it reduces neural flexibility. The brain struggles to adapt. Others sense this rigidity instantly. Conversations feel stuck, heavy, and oddly artificial. And here's the chilling part. The more someone feels ignored, the more intensely they attempt to be seen. This confidence inflation becomes what behaviorists call ego overexertion. It shows up in too loud laughter, dominating topics, or standing awkwardly close. People step back instinctively, and the older man misreads their distance as disrespect, fueling bitterness. Epictetus warned, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." If a man reacts to distance with desperation, people retreat faster. If he reacts with calm patience, the room relaxes around him. Consider this scene. Two older men enter a coffee shop. The first scans the room anxiously, eyes darting, searching for someone to validate his presence. His smile feels forced, his jokes eager, his questions invasive. Everyone senses the performance. The second walks in with quiet composure, acknowledges space, waits to be invited into conversation, observes before reacting. People lean toward him, curious. The difference is not appearance, but identity security. Cleanthes believed virtue meant alignment between inner stability and outward action. When action betrays insecurity, virtue dissolves. And dissolving virtue is visible. It's what we label as creepy. Not because age is wrong, but because instability in older age feels unnatural. Humans expect elders to embody calm, not chaos. When that expectation flips, discomfort arises. Let's peel deeper. The human brain evolved to detect power and threat through micro-behaviors. Younger individuals instinctively look to older ones for leadership cues. When an older man appears emotionally needy, it contradicts evolutionary expectation, triggering subtle alarm. Behaviorally, this shows in younger people avoiding eye contact, shortening conversations, or fake laughing to escape The older man, confused, pushes harder, intensifying exactly what others are avoiding. This cycle becomes what therapists call discomfort escalation, and it's tragic because the intention is often innocent. Seneca warned, "We are more often frightened than hurt." Older men fear invisibility more than loneliness, but that fear becomes visible, and visibility without confidence becomes creepiness. But here's the twist almost no one teaches. The moment a man stops competing with time, time begins respecting him. Wear wisdom instead of youth, and you become magnetic. Try to borrow youth, and you become unsettling. Zeno taught harmony with nature. Aging is nature, and nature rewards acceptance. Imagine the man who speaks less of himself and more of ideas, who listens without waiting to talk, who compliments ambition rather than appearance. People not only welcome him, they seek him out. His presence becomes rare in a world drowning in noise. Modern neuroscience confirms calm, measured speech signals cognitive strength and emotional maturity. This is why older mentors in movies feel powerful. They exist outside ego. But before you learn the first of the 3 habits that shifts a man's presence from unsettling to undeniably respected, there's one more psychological lock to open. The way older men often confuse relevance with attention. Relevance is earned through value. Attention is chased through performance. When these lines blur, people recoil. In the next paragraph, we will dissect this invisible line, the line between dignity and desperation. And once you see it, you will forever spot it in others, and maybe even in yourself.
There is a quiet, almost invisible line between dignity and desperation. Cross it, and people feel uneasy without knowing why. Stay on the right side, and your presence feels wise, seasoned, magnetic. Modern psychology calls this distinction value projection versus value extraction. A man projecting value brings perspective, mentorship, calm energy. A man extracting value demands attention, validation, flattery. The older men who appear creepy often don't realize they are subconsciously trying to extract emotional nourishment from younger minds. They compliment looks instead of character, offer unsolicited advice to feel needed, or hover near younger groups to feel included. Instead of giving energy, they siphon it. Marcus Aurelius warned, "A person's worth is measured by the worth of what he values." If you value the approval of youth, your worth diminishes in their eyes. But if you value wisdom, discipline, composure, your presence becomes a mirror reflecting maturity. People approach mirrors of growth, not need. Let's go deeper with a scenario. Imagine a young woman at work, simply doing her job. An older colleague frequently compliments her appearance, lingers near her desk, or insists on personal conversations. To him, it feels harmless, maybe even kind. But the fundamental misalignment is emotional context. His attention is flavored by validation hunger. She senses the extraction. The creepiness isn't attraction itself, it's the power imbalance layered with emotional neediness. Neuroscience shows the amygdala activates when boundaries blur, even slightly. The brain screams, "Something doesn't fit." Cleanthes emphasized harmony. Actions must reflect virtue, not craving. If an older man compliments character, ambition, effort, people feel uplifted. Compliment appearance, and he appears predatory. Not because attraction is evil, but because context transforms meaning. Another side of the line appears when older men compete with younger men for attention, especially from women. Not physically, but energetically. They boast loudly, interrupt, or insert sexual innuendo into jokes to prove they still have it. To youth, this insecurity feels desperate. And nothing triggers creepiness faster than seeing a man try to reclaim youth through performance. Seneca wrote, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere."
When a man spreads his energy thin to be seen, he loses presence. Yet observe the man who holds his ground, speaks calmly, and allows youth to shine. His energy thickens with gravitas. Respect follows him like a shadow. But here's the subtlety younger people rarely articulate. Creepy energy is felt more than seen. It's in the micro-tension of the voice, the darting of eyes, the awkward laugh. Behavioral experts call this affect incongruence, when emotions don't match context. A man tells a joke too loudly, his eyes beg for approval, his smile strains. The brain registers mismatch, and mismatch feels unsafe. Epictetus taught, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. The wise older man accepts he won't always understand modern slang or trends. He doesn't pretend. Pretending births incongruence. Authenticity births ease. Let's examine posture. A dignified older man doesn't lean into conversations. He invites them subtly. He respects space. Personal space psychology shows humans extend distance when trust decreases. When an older man has unresolved social hunger, he unconsciously invades space, signaling unpredictability. Younger minds recoil. Stoicism teaches temperance, self-restraint. The absence of restraint becomes visible in proximity, interrupting, or oversharing. But temperance creates a gentle orbit of respect. People step closer willingly. Now, imagine the older man who remains curious, but not competitive. Rather than boasting about his past, he asks questions, learns from youth, admires new perspectives. Modern neuroscience shows curiosity releases oxytocin, bonding hormone, but competitiveness triggers cortisol, stress hormone. Youth bond to curiosity. They flee from cortisol. Zeno taught harmony with change, not resistance. A man who adapts quietly becomes timeless. Let's anchor this in a personal narrative. Maybe you've seen an older uncle at a family gathering, always trying too hard to be funny, cracking jokes that were edgy decades ago but now fall flat. Eyes shift away, conversations die, silence follows. He feels the distance and tries harder, intensifying the discomfort. The spiral becomes a social tragedy, intention pure, impact unsettling. The elder who instead observes, encourages, shares wisdom when asked, people gather around him naturally. His chair never empties. Before we unveil the first habit, soon, we must uncover one more psychological trap: the fear of invisibility. As men age, attention decreases. If they never built internal validation, they chase external scraps. That chase leaks through behavior, and nothing is more unsettling than invisible hunger. The next paragraph will unravel this fear at its root, and once you understand it, the first habit will appear like a mirror you can never unsee.
By now, we've peeled back two uncomfortable layers of why older men begin to appear creepy as time shapes their habits, and each reason carries the subtle fingerprints of unexamined thought, something the Stoics spent centuries warning against. But the third habit is one that hides in plain sight, disguised as wisdom, yet quietly repelling everyone around you: the desperate need to control people, outcomes, and conversations. It's not always loud. It doesn't always look aggressive. In fact, sometimes it's disguised behind smiles, polite questions, or unsolicited advice. But beneath the surface, it sends a chilling signal. I need to influence your choices so I can feel secure. Younger generations feel it instinctively. Women sense it faster than men. And society has grown hypersensitive to it in recent years. The moment someone feels watched, influenced, or pressured, their nervous system flickers into defense mode. What once might have been seen as caring or mentorship now reads like manipulation. And modern culture has very little tolerance for anything that even smells like that. To understand why this habit develops, imagine a man who has lived decades slowly losing control over his youth, his career trajectory, his romantic relevance, even his physical health. Each year takes something away, unless the mind is trained to accept impermanence. But some never develop that skill. So instead of focusing inward, they look outward and try to assert control over their environment, particularly the behavior of younger people. At first, it appears harmless. She shouldn't dress like that. He should take my advice. They should respect me more. But this internal dialogue reveals a deep truth the Stoics wrote endlessly about, that the more you cling, the more you decay. Marcus Aurelius whispered into his own private journal, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." When your thoughts demand control over outcomes, you become a prisoner to disappointment, and prisoners radiate tension. That tension is exactly what people interpret as creepiness. And here's the unsettling psychological angle. Studies on social perception show that when someone tries too hard to direct another person's choices, the brain's amygdala triggers suspicion. It doesn't matter if the intent is harmless. The mind detects threat in the pressure itself. That's why unsolicited compliments toward younger women can feel slimy, even if the speaker believes he's being friendly. The praise carries subtle expectation. Stoicism teaches that virtue is free of need. Admiration given without attachment feels safe, but admiration given to refill one's ego feels predatory. Seneca warned, "He who needs others to praise him is vulnerable to their scorn." And you can see it everywhere. Older men who insist they're simply being nice completely misread the emotional effect their words create. Niceness with unconscious motive is not kindness. It's hunger wearing polite clothing. Zoom out and you'll notice a pattern. The man who tries to control others rarely controls himself. When he tells young men how to behave, it's often bitterness disguised as guidance. When he comments on young women's appearance, it's loneliness disguised as approval. The world senses the disguise long before he realizes he's wearing it. The Stoics would call this a life lived outside the boundaries of the dichotomy of control, the principle that you can direct only your intentions, never another person's response. Epictetus was mercilessly clear. When you begin to desire that which is not within your power, misfortune will follow. The tragedy is that older men who never learned this lesson double down instead of letting go. They cling harder, talk louder, insert themselves deeper, and in doing so, they accelerate the perception that something isn't right. Imagine an older man at a social event, hovering around conversations, offering advice no one asked for. People smile, but their bodies shift away. Their eyes dart to exit points. This is not malice, it's survival instinct. His presence doesn't feel grounded, it feels hungry. Contrast this with the Stoic elder who stands quietly, comfortable in silence, revealing nothing to prove, offering advice only when invited. People drift toward him, not away. The absence of need is magnetic. That is what most older men lost without noticing, the power of non-attachment. Control pushes, confidence attracts. Stoicism teaches that when you surrender the need to bend others to your will, you begin to radiate ease, and ease is the opposite of creepy. So if you feel life slipping beyond your grip, good. It means you're finally seeing reality. But fill that gap with acceptance, not pressure. Discipline, not commentary. Presence, not projection. The Stoic doesn't grab the steering wheel of other people's lives. He builds mastery over his own. Remember this carefully. The moment you release the desire to control how others act, speak, or react, you stop triggering their alarm systems. You become the calm in the room, not the discomfort. And nothing is more unsettling than a man who demands attention versus a man who commands it without trying. One suffocates, the other inspires.
But beneath these three external habits lies a problem so subtle, most older men never even notice its roots until it's too late. Their relationship with time becomes distorted. This is where creepiness silently begins to harden into permanence, not because of age itself, but because time becomes something they chase instead of something they occupy. When you're young, time feels abundant and forward-moving. Your goals are ahead of you. Your energy pulls you outward, and possibility saturates every choice. But as men age without introspection, time begins to whisper a different question. Is this all there is? The Stoics confronted this fear head-on. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a man's value is determined by the depth of his inner world, not the length of his years. But many older men ignore this wisdom, and instead of cultivating depth, they try to imitate youth. And imitation, especially when forced, carries a discomfort that others can feel instantly. Picture the older man trying too hard to blend into younger circles, adopting slang, mimicking trends, even echoing the nervous energy of those decades younger. On the surface, you could argue he's just trying to stay relevant. But psychologically, people sense something off. Why? Because authenticity ages like wine. Imitation ages like milk. There's nothing wrong with being social with younger people. Many wise men guide younger generations with grace. But the key distinction is motive. Stoicism teaches that when your identity is anchored internally, you engage with others out of abundance. But when identity is built on external validation, every interaction becomes a subtle extraction. That extraction triggers the same subconscious alarm as desperation. Not because anyone hates age, but because the absence of inner foundation feels unpredictable. Humans fear unpredictable energy. Neuroscience reveals that people scan each other for predictability cues within seconds. Posture, gaze steadiness, conversational tempo. Older men who fear irrelevance often overcompensate by leaning too close, lingering too long, or speaking too intensely. They don't mean harm, they simply want to be seen again. But that longing leaks out through body language like cold moisture from a cracked pipe, and others instinctively recoil. Seneca warned that a man cannot be happy if he must rely on the judgment of others. Yet modern culture didn't teach men how to age with psychological sovereignty. Instead, it worships youth and leaves the aging feeling like fading background actors in a world obsessed with newness. This hunger to reclaim lost dignity becomes disguised as friendliness, but hungry friendliness unsettles people. There's another twist. As responsibilities fade and careers plateau, many older men lose their directional momentum. Without purpose, attention drifts outward into the lives of others. Gossip, commentary, unsolicited opinions, not because they're malicious, but because their internal compass has stopped pointing somewhere. Marcus Aurelius said, "Stop allowing your mind to be a slave." He wasn't speaking about physical chains. He meant slavery to distraction, comparison, and nostalgia. When an older man becomes emotionally homeless, lacking a mission, lacking personal rituals, lacking inner architecture, he begins dwelling in the emotional homes of others. And nothing is creepier than someone mentally loitering, hovering without reason, appearing where they don't belong. We must confront a hard truth with compassion. Society doesn't teach men how to evolve into elders. It only teaches them how to chase youth. So when the chase fails, many panic. Some retreat into bitterness. Others lean outward into younger energy like ivy searching for a tree to cling to. Stoicism offers the opposite path. Root deeper into your own soil. Train your character. Sharpen your silence. Study yourself. Build an inner world so intriguing that you no longer need to harvest energy from the atmosphere around you. When you do that, younger people begin to approach you naturally, drawn not to your attempts at relevance, but to the serenity you radiate by refusing to fight time. And here's the irony. When you stop chasing relevance, you become relevant. When you stop craving attention, respect follows. When you stop gripping youth, maturity becomes your superpower. People admire the man who ages intentionally because he embodies what they secretly fear they won't. Dignity in the face of entropy. The Stoic elder isn't creepy,
He's fascinating. He doesn't insert himself, he is invited. He doesn't demand back in my day authority, he demonstrates quiet proof. Nothing is more magnetic than a man comfortable with the present, unafraid of the past, and unconcerned with the future's judgment. Time bows to such men because they bow to nothing but their own integrity.
So now, we arrive at the first of the 3 habits that quietly transform an older man from unsettling to undeniably respected. A habit so simple in appearance, yet so rare in practice that when you see it, you feel it immediately. Habit number 1, commanding inner silence. Not the silence of awkwardness, but the silence of presence. Most older men speak to prove they still matter, but wise men understand that the more you talk to validate yourself, the more you broadcast insecurity. Marcus Aurelius advised, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." When your thoughts are frantic, your speech leaks desperation. When your thoughts are composed, your silence becomes a force. Modern neuroscience shows that a calm, regulated nervous system influences others' nervous systems automatically, creating comfort, trust, and respect. Think of the older man who pauses before speaking, who listens without rushing to reply, who doesn't fill every gap with stories of the past. His silence communicates, "I am enough even without your approval." People relax around him. They lean in. They ask him questions instead of avoiding them. This shift from performance to presence is where creepiness evaporates and dignity blossoms. And here's the overlooked twist. Silence isn't empty. It's full of signal. Younger people subconsciously scan for the older man's emotional state. If they sense neediness, they recoil. If they sense groundedness, they approach. Epictetus taught, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." In modern psychology, this is called attentive neutrality, the ability to hold space without projecting anxiety or irritation. Most fail here, not because they lack wisdom, but because they fear invisibility. But when you embrace invisibility, paradoxically, you become unforgettable. It's the energy of, "I am not here to extract, I am here to know." And knowing is magnetic. If you apply only this one habit, fewer words, more awareness, deeper observation, you instantly cross the invisible line between unsettling presence and respected presence. People feel safe, not studied. To sharpen this further, look at historical Stoics. Cleanthes was known not for dramatic speeches, but for thoughtful discipline. When others indulged in argument, he observed quietly, letting truth reveal itself. Modern society has reversed this. We reward noise, commentary, performance. But noise becomes eerie in older age. Silence becomes noble. Ask yourself, do people feel at ease when you enter a room, or do they feel monitored, evaluated, analyzed? Creepy energy often emerges when silence becomes judgment instead of serenity. The Stoic art is to turn silence into warmth. A relaxed posture, a half smile of genuine interest, soft eye contact, not staring. Subtle emotional signals communicate deep psychological messages. People do not recoil from silence, they recoil from tension. Your silence must be chosen, not anxious. When chosen, it radiates maturity. Now that we've opened this first door, a more complex question appears. If commanding inner silence makes you respected, what makes you sought after? Surprisingly, it has nothing to do with how interesting you are. The second habit, which we will uncover next, reverses a common assumption that older men cling to. And once you understand it, you will see why some elders gather circles of younger friends and mentees naturally, while others become invisible. This second habit turns the gravitational field of your presence forward instead of backward, and almost no one practices it intentionally. We will explore it in the next paragraph, but prepare yourself.
It may require letting go of one of the most comforting illusions about age.
Habit number 2. Become a fountain, not a museum. The moment an older man begins to live entirely through the past, he becomes a relic, something people glance at politely before moving on. Museums are interesting for a moment, but they are dead spaces, filled with artifacts of what once was. A fountain, however, pours forward. It creates movement, refreshment, curiosity. Most older men don't realize that when every story they tell begins with, "Back in my day," they are signaling stagnation. Younger people don't fear age. They fear dead energy, energy that clings backward, obsessing over old victories or outdated paradigms. Zeno taught that a man must flow with nature, and nature flows forward. When you speak about books you're currently reading, skills you're learning, ideas you're refining, you radiate vitality. Suddenly, instead of being creepy, you are intriguing. People gather around fountains, not relics. Neuroscience supports this. The brain rewards novelty and growth, and people subconsciously associate those who grow with safety and vitality. Meanwhile, those who cling to the past trigger caution responses, as if something is stuck. Consider the older man who says, "I'm learning a new language," or "I'm exploring this new philosophy," or "I'm refining my fitness." His age becomes an asset, proof that ambition doesn't expire. Younger people feel inspired, not drained. They see a possible future self who remains curious. In contrast, the older man who constantly retells the same stories, who mocks modern trends out of insecurity, who criticizes technology he refuses to learn, projects emotional decay. And decay feels eerie because life is wired to avoid rot. Seneca warned that life is long if you know how to use it. Using life means feeding the mind's flame, not dusting old trophies. When someone lives on mental leftovers, others sense the emotional staleness. It's not the stories that are the problem, it's the repetition without growth. Repetition signals mental looping, and looping behavior is deeply unsettling to the subconscious. To embody this second habit, shift your conversations from achievement to curiosity. Instead of proving you've lived, demonstrate you're still alive. Ask younger people what they're learning, what they think about current challenges, what ideas excite them. Don't one-up their experience, expand it. Cleanthes believed that the wise man is a perpetual student, not a retired teacher. This is the superpower older men forget. Humility becomes attractive when paired with experience. Arrogance, however, becomes grotesque with age. There's an evolutionary reason for this. Tribes survived by following elders who adapted, not those who clung to old ways. Elders who refused to evolve became threats to survival. That evolutionary echo still beats quietly in modern social behavior. When an older man resists change, people instinctively pull back. But fountains don't just overflow with novelty, they overflow with forward-focused energy. Share your current questions, not just your conclusions. Present your present tense, not only your past. And you'll notice something remarkable. Younger people open up, not out of obligation, but fascination. They feel your life has chapters still being written. Museum men frighten younger minds because museums remind them of endings. Fountains remind them of beginnings. Age can be a beacon, but only when connected to growth. And remember this, wisdom has no expiration date, but ego does. If your ego is trapped decades behind, no one will follow you there. Now, you might be wondering, if inner silence creates presence and forward flow creates intrigue, what creates gravity? Magnetic gravity, the kind that pulls respect without a word, the kind that transforms your age into authority instead of desperation. Habit number 3 is the rarest of all, because it requires a psychological shift most men avoid their entire lives. It's not about how you speak, it's not about what you know. It's about the single energy younger people subconsciously crave from older men. An energy that cannot be faked, borrowed, or performed. In the next paragraph, we will dive into this final habit, and once you understand it,
you'll realize why some older men become mentors, leaders, and respected elders, while others become ghosts in rooms they never learned to leave.
Habit number 3. Cultivate boundaried warmth. This phrase may sound unusual, but it is the invisible line that separates the respected elder from the unsettling presence. Boundaries without warmth feel cold and judgmental. Warmth without boundaries feels needy and invasive. But when a man masters both, he becomes magnetic. Younger people subconsciously scan older men for two things: emotional safety and personal sovereignty. Emotional safety means you are not projecting disappointment, bitterness, or hidden motives. Sovereignty means you do not chase, cling, or hover. When warmth flows freely but stops respectfully, others feel invited rather than trapped. Most older men fail here unintentionally. They lean too far into friendliness, trying to prove they're not irrelevant. But this overleaning signals need, and need in older age triggers discomfort in younger minds. Zeno taught that virtue sits in the golden mean between excess and deficiency, and here we see its modern psychological reflection. Too much engagement makes people step back. Too little makes them feel judged. Boundaried warmth says, I'm happy to connect, but I don't require your validation to feel whole. Watch interactions closely and you'll notice something subtle. Older men who trigger discomfort often stand too close, linger after conversations end, or offer advice without invitation. These micro-behaviors leak an emotional hunger that others feel in their nervous system. Neuroscientists call this interpersonal intensity overload, when someone's emotional presence demands more energy than you expected to give. It's not intentional harm, it's a survival mechanism. The older man subconsciously fears fading, so he tries to anchor himself in others. But the Stoics taught that clinging is the opposite of virtue. Seneca warned that obsession with others' approval chains us to their moods. Boundaried warmth lets others breathe. It lets silence end conversations gracefully. It invites without grasping. And here's the paradox. The less you cling, the more others cling to you. This habit reveals itself through small details. You smile with your eyes, but don't stare. You ask curious questions, but don't probe. You share wisdom only when asked. You don't chase attention, you anchor presence. Modern psychology confirms this through attachment theory. Secure attachment radiates calm confidence, while anxious attachment leaks through neediness. Neuroscientists can sense the difference instantly. An older man with secure internal boundaries becomes the emotional equivalent of a sturdy oak, rooted, steady, offering shade, but never reaching out as if desperate for hands. People approach him because they trust his energy won't entangle them. Without this habit, even the most impressive older men can feel creepy simply because their warmth leaks beyond its container. And there's something even deeper at play. Humans are wired to categorize older individuals into two subconscious archetypes: mentors and threats. Mentors carry calm curiosity, sovereignty, and gentle boundaries. Threats carry unpredictability, emotional hunger, and invisible demands. Boundaried warmth is the trait that determines which archetype you embody. It's why in movies, the wise elder rarely forces himself into the hero's story. He waits, appears, offers, then steps back. This stepping back is not indifference, it's respect. And respect for space is what earns respect in return. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations that the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. In modern terms, don't mirror desperation in a world addicted to attention. Be the calm center people orbit. Now, with these three habits lightly sketched, commanding inner silence, becoming a fountain, and cultivating boundaried warmth, a new question emerges. How do you embody them in real-life scenarios? Knowing them intellectually is not enough. Embodiment requires ritual. In the next paragraph, we will explore the micro-behaviors that activate these habits in rooms, conversations, even digital interactions. And once you see these activators, you'll realize how small shifts create massive perception changes. But there is also a deeper layer beneath all three habits, a hidden root that determines whether these behaviors are authentic or performed. That deeper layer is the psychological foundation separating the elder from the aging man, and we will peel back that final layer soon.
Understanding habits intellectually is one thing, but the world doesn't respond to your thoughts. It responds to your behaviors, your micro-expressions, your timing, your emotional gravity. The older man who becomes creepy rarely makes one catastrophic mistake. He commits dozens of tiny social violations that accumulate into discomfort. So how do you embody commanding inner silence, forward-flowing fountain energy, and boundaried warmth in everyday life? Start with the doorway moment. When entering a space, pause for half a breath. This micro-pause signals to others that you're regulated, not frantic. Neuroscientists note that humans mirror the nervous systems of those around them. If you rush in with anxious energy, everyone around you feels compelled to brace themselves. If you walk in with quiet presence, you draw calmness out of the room. Don't speak immediately. Let the space greet you. Marcus Aurelius called this settling into the moment. In practice, it means you never appear to be searching for validation. You appear to be observing, absorbing. In conversation, embody fountain energy by asking present-focused questions rather than replaying your greatest hits. Try asking, "What are you excited about lately?" or "What's been challenging your thinking?" These questions signal intellectual vitality, and when sharing your own experiences, keep them short, relevant, and connected to the present tense. "Here's something I'm learning now," or "I'm experimenting with improving this part of my life." The more your language points forward, the more your age represents wisdom instead of weight. Seneca believed that the wise man learns in every season. When you demonstrate learning, not lecturing, you become a rare source of oxygen in conversations, and people breathe easier around you. Now, boundaries. Boundaried warmth is communicated through timing. When the conversation begins to naturally lull, don't force it back to life. Instead, gracefully release it with a smile, a gentle nod, or a brief parting line like, "I enjoyed talking. Let's pick this up another time." Notice something. You didn't cling. You didn't hover. You didn't push. Modern psychology calls this conversational closure, the skill of letting interactions end with dignity. People subconsciously reward this ability with trust, and trust is the antidote to creepiness. When offering advice, ask permission. Would you like a perspective on that? This signals humility and gives control to the listener. Younger people relax because they don't feel invaded. When you share wisdom without consent, you feel intrusive. When you ask first, you feel generous. There's another micro-habit almost no one teaches. Manage your gaze. Long, unbroken eye contact with intense expression can trigger threat responses. Instead, soften the eyes. Occasionally glance aside thoughtfully and match the emotional tone of the speaker. This communicates empathy instead of scrutiny. Epictetus taught that self-control begins with managing attention, and attention includes visual presence. Also monitor physical distance. Standing too close, leaning inward excessively, or hovering behind someone's shoulder feels predatory, even if your intentions are harmless. Maintain comfortable space. Boundaries communicated through proximity signal maturity. When you respect physical space, you announce silently, "Your comfort matters." People remember that. Digital presence matters too. Creepy energy can emerge online through over-commenting, using outdated flirtation, or reacting to content excessively. Instead, practice sparse, thoughtful engagement. Comment to add value, not to get noticed. Share insights, not compliments that can be misinterpreted. Boundaried warmth in the digital world means you are present without being pervasive. Cleanthus would call this intentional footprint. Your digital imprint should be light, but meaningful. When others see your name pop up, they should feel curiosity, not dread. Now here's the hidden accelerator. Pair these micro-behaviors with calm body language, relaxed shoulders, gentle hand gestures, slow speech tempo. Rush and you appear frantic, freeze and you appear tense, flow and you appear wise. People don't consciously analyze these signals, but their nervous systems do. The Stoics mastered this thousands of years ago. They believed that composure was visible, tangible,
almost touchable. And indeed, modern neuroscience agrees. Composure is a physical aura. Younger people crave this energy more than they admit because their peers are often anxious, reactive, and chaotic. But there's a deeper layer beneath all of this, the psychological root. Without addressing this final layer, these habits can feel like tactics instead of truths. And when a behavior feels performed, others can sense it instantly. Performance without authenticity becomes creepier, faster than silence ever could. In the next paragraph, we will explore this root, the inner architecture that makes all of these habits real. Without it, everything collapses. With it, you become the elder archetype every room secretly hopes will appear. And it is here, in this foundation, that the true transformation begins.
There is another subtle but powerful layer to this entire conversation that is often ignored, yet it explains why some older men age into elegance while others slip into creepiness without ever noticing. Ego attachment to youth. You see, when a man's identity is built entirely on how desirable he was when he was younger, how many compliments he could extract from rooms, or how easily he could get female attention, he begins to panic the moment age enters the picture. Wrinkles are not merely wrinkles to him, they are threats to his identity. Gray hair is not merely gray hair, it is evidence that his former currency no longer holds the same value. And when a man panics, he begins to compensate. He talks about his past conquests, he chases younger women to feel relevant again, he lingers too long in conversations hoping to revive that dying spark. Stoicism tells us that anything external, beauty, validation, youth, was never ours to begin with. Marcus Aurelius wrote that clarity emerges when the mind accepts nature's flow, and nature's flow includes aging. When an older man fights this flow, the world sees desperation instead of dignity. Consider the story of a man named Dmitri. In his youth, he was charismatic, fashionable, admired by women everywhere he went. But as the decades rolled forward, Dmitri didn't grow, he simply grayed. His identity stayed frozen in time. He would attend social gatherings wearing clothes designed for college students, speak like someone half his age, and position himself near younger groups, laughing too loud, trying too hard. People didn't call him creepy because of malice. They called him creepy because he was refusing to be who he actually was. There was no grounding, no presence, only performance. A Stoic would say that Dimitri's attachment chained him to illusions. Seneca warned that the man who clings desperately to fading pleasures is already a slave. Meanwhile, there was an older neighbor named Yusuf. He was nearly the same age as Dmitri, but everything about him felt different. He didn't pretend to be young, nor did he distance himself from life. He aged into a calmer form of himself. He wore clothes that fit his maturity, listened more than he spoke, and when he interacted with younger people, there was no ulterior motive. There was simply curiosity and respect. And because he did not need validation, younger men admired him. Younger women trusted him. He embodied a lesson most men never learn. When you stop trying to be interesting, you become intriguing. Marcus Aurelius wrote that true beauty in a person comes from their fulfillment of nature's role, and Yusuf embraced his role as a seasoned, grounded man who had wisdom to offer rather than attention to steal. This difference reveals the fourth silent habit that makes older men appear creepy, trying to resurrect a younger identity to avoid confronting age. The Stoics remind us, aging is not a loss, it's a transformation. Men who accept this glow with authority. Men who resist it radiate anxiety. When you pretend to be younger than you are, everyone can feel the tension, and tension is uncomfortable to be around. But when you walk into a room owning your years, your experience, your refined calm, you become a lighthouse in a storm of insecurity. Younger people are drawn to that.
not because you chase them, but because authenticity has gravity. So ask yourself, are you clinging to yesterday, or are you building the presence of a man who has nothing to prove? Aging well is not about staying young. It's about evolving into someone your younger self would respect.
There's a fascinating psychological twist that psychologists and Stoic thinkers both point toward. When an older man communicates from a place of scarcity, he becomes socially unpleasant without realizing it. Scarcity says, I must prove myself. Scarcity whispers, don't forget me, don't ignore me. And when a man lives in scarcity, his presence feels heavy. He speaks too long because silence threatens him. He compliments too soon because rejection terrifies him. He hovers too closely because distance feels like abandonment. Younger people can sense this emotional pull, even if they can't explain it. They label it as creepy. But what they're really reacting to is a man who is starving for validation. Stoicism teaches the opposite. The man who does not need others to reassure him becomes naturally respected. Epictetus said that a man becomes wise when he stops trying to control what was never his. Approval was never yours. Youth was never yours. Time was never yours. But character? That is yours forever. Think about this visually. Imagine walking into a forest and encountering two old trees. One is twisted, dried, leaning desperately towards sunlight it can't reach. It looks frail, uncomfortable, unnatural. The other stands tall, thick roots anchored in the earth, weathered but dignified. One tree feels chaotic, the other feels calming. That is how older men appear in social spaces. When you're grounded, people relax around you. When you're desperate, they tense up. You do not have to chase trust. You earn it by being anchored in who you are. Younger people admire older men who embody wisdom, self-control, and calm humor. Those qualities are attractive because they're rare in a world of frantic, attention-hungry chaos. Another reason older men can slip into creepiness is conversational imbalance. Many talk at younger people instead of with them. It becomes a subtle power demonstration. I know more, I've seen more. But true wisdom is not loud. True wisdom asks questions. It listens. It understands that every generation sees life differently and can teach something new. Seneca warned that arrogance blinds us to learning. The older man who listens shows humility, and humility never reads as creepy. It reads as safe. It reads as honorable. It reads as someone who has done the work of maturing. Here is where Stoicism provides a practical guideline. Behave according to virtue and nothing else. Virtue-based behavior makes the creepy label impossible. Virtue means no hidden motives. Virtue means appropriate boundaries. Virtue means self-awareness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." A man who lives by that sentence never needs to chase comfort from others. He generates it internally. So if you want to avoid creeping people out, not only in youth but in every decade, choose maturity over manipulation, choose authenticity over attention, and choose presence over performance. Because the greatest compliment someone can silently give you is simply this: I feel safe around you.
So now the curtain closes, and we return to where we began. The unsettling truth of why some older men appear creepy. It was never really about age. It was about energy. It was about intention. It was about the silent signals sent from a man who never learned to govern himself. Now you've seen the hidden cracks, overcompensating for lost youth, ignoring boundaries, and living with scarcity. Ancient Stoics understood that a man loses dignity not when he grows old, but when he grows hollow. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that life's tragedy is not that it ends too soon, but that we wait too long to begin truly living. That's the open loop we started with, and here is the resolution. The free habits you must replace with 3 virtues. Where seeking attention once governed you, cultivate quiet confidence.
Where poor boundaries once shaped you, practice respectful distance. Where scarcity once drained you, nurture inner fulfillment. When you embody these virtues, the so-called creepy aura dissolves and is replaced with something powerful, an aura of respect. And here's the deeper revelation. Young people are not repelled by older men. They are repelled by older men who have lost their way. But they are deeply attracted to those who embody maturity, wisdom, and calm strength. Cleanthes once said, "Lead by example, not opinion." That is the final key. You don't have to announce your value. You live it. You don't have to justify your existence. You demonstrate it. And as your life becomes a beacon instead of a broadcast, people don't run from you. They gravitate toward you. They trust you because your presence feels like shelter rather than storm. You become the elder every chaotic room quietly looks toward for emotional alignment. Here's the last open loop closed, the fear of becoming invisible as you age. It's real. But invisibility is conquered not by shouting louder, but by becoming more magnetic. Magnetism is not youth. It is depth. It is integrity. It is emotional composure. It is character carved by struggle. The Stoics believed that the soul shines through the face. A man who has done the inner work becomes radiant with a calm nobility. And the world never sees that as creepy. It sees it as rare. So now it's your turn. Take a quiet breath. Ask yourself, how will I show up differently tomorrow? Not to impress, not to chase approval, but to build the kind of inner fortress Seneca praised, a fortress no one can invade and no insecurity can shake. Because at the end of all of this, you are not defined by age. You are defined by virtue, by how you treat others, by how you carry yourself when no one is watching. If you want to be unforgettable, become admirable. If you want respect, live respectably. If you want to feel seen, see others clearly. Your presence is either a gift or a burden. Make it a gift, and let your life whisper the final Stoic truth. The man who masters himself never creeps. He leads. He inspires. He becomes timeless.